They called her the Ghost of Table 9. She walked into New York's most exclusive restaurant wearing a soaked raincoat and muddy boots. The manager wanted to call the police. The billionaires dining nearby laughed at her. They thought she was a beggar looking for a free meal. No one knew that the man sitting at the head of the room, Dominic Sterling, the ruthless king of Wall Street, was the reason she was there. And no one knew that the trembling waitress, who risked her job to pour the woman a glass of water, was about to bring an empire crashing down with just one whispered sentence in Italian. This is the true story of how a forgotten mother reclaimed her throne, and the waitress who saved her. The rain in Manhattan that Tuesday was not merely weather. It was a verdict. It lashed against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the Obsidian Room, New York City's most impenetrable fortress of fine dining, blurring the lights of Fifth Avenue into smeared streaks of gold and charcoal. Inside, the air smelled of white truffles, aged mahogany, and old money. Sophia Rossi adjusted the collar of her starch-stiff uniform, her fingers trembling slightly. It was her third month at the Obsidian, and the imposter syndrome had yet to fade. She was 24, drowning in student loans from a nursing degree she couldn't afford to finish, and living in a shoebox apartment in Queens that shook every time the subway passed. Table 4 needs water, sparkling. Not tap, you idiot, Laurent, the floor manager, hissed into her ear. Laurent was a man who wore his arrogance like a second skin. He had slicked back hair that looked like it had been varnished, and he treated the waitstaff not as employees, but as malfunctioning appliances. "Yes, Monsieur Laurent," Sophia murmured, keeping her eyes down. "And fix your apron," he added, snapping his fingers near her hip. "You look like you've been wrestling with a stray dog. Remember where you are." The Obsidian does not tolerate mediocrity. Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat and moved to table 4. She poured the San Pellegrino with practiced precision, one hand behind her back, invisible. That was the rule here. Be invisible. The billionaires, the tech moguls, the politicians, they didn't pay $500 for a risotto to see the person serving it. They paid to feel like gods served by ghosts. The restaurant was buzzing tonight. In the far corner, the king's table, a semi-private booth elevated on a mahogany platform, was being prepped. The entire staff was on edge. Dominic Sterling was coming. Dominic Sterling was not just a billionaire, he was an architectural force. At 38, he owned half the skyline. He was the CEO of Sterling Vanguard, a conglomerate that swallowed smaller companies for sport. He was known for two things: his terrifying business acumen and his absolute lack of mercy. "He's bringing the senators tonight," whispered Marco, the sommelier, as he polished a crystal decanter near the service station. "Laurent is sweating bullets. If the wine isn't exactly 64 degrees, heads will roll." "I just hope I don't have to serve him," Sophia whispered back, clutching her tray. "His eyes, they look right through you." "Don't worry," Marco scoffed. "Laurent won't let you near the king's table. He thinks you're too soft." Sophia didn't argue. She was soft. She missed her nonna, who had passed away the year before, leaving Sophia alone in a city that felt like it was made of cold steel. She missed the smell of garlic and rosemary frying in a tiny kitchen. She missed being seen as a person. The heavy oak doors at the front of the restaurant swung open. A hush fell over the room. It wasn't Dominic Sterling. It was a woman. She stood in the entryway dripping wet. She wore a beige trench coat that had seen better decades, the hem muddied and fraying. Her grey hair was plastered to her forehead, escaping from a woolen scarf that looked hand-knitted but moth-eaten. She held a plastic bodega bag in one hand. She looked like a glitch in the matrix of the Obsidian. She looked like she belonged in a soup kitchen, not in a foyer with marble floors imported from Carrara. The hostess, a tall blonde named Jessica, who looked like a runway model, froze. Her smile faltered. "Excuse me, ma'am." Jessica's voice was high, polite but firm. "Deliveries are around the back." The old woman didn't move. She scanned the room, her eyes dark and intelligent, searching. She didn't look crazy. She looked exhausted. She looked like a soldier who had walked 1,000 miles to reach a battlefield she wasn't sure she could survive. "I am not a delivery," the woman said. Her voice was raspy, accented, heavy Italian. "I am here to eat." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the dining room. A hedge fund manager at table 6 pointed and whispered to his mistress. Laurent materialized at the front desk instantly, his face turning a shade of purple that clashed with his tie. "Madame," Laurent said, stepping into her personal space, "you are mistaken. This is a private establishment. We are fully booked for the next 6 months. Please leave before I call security to escort you out." The woman looked at Laurent. She didn't flinch. She reached into her pocket, her hand shaking from the cold, and pulled out a wad of cash. It wasn't a credit card. It was a roll of crumpled $20 bills and 50s, held together by a rubber band. "I have money," she said, her dignity fighting the trembling in her voice. "I want soup. Just soup." "We do not serve soup," Laurent sneered, looking at the wet puddle forming around her cheap boots. "We serve cuisine, and we certainly do not serve people who drag the street in with them. Get out." Sophia was watching from the service station, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw the way the old woman's shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in a profound, crushing sadness. It reminded Sophia so much of her nonna in the hospital, that look of being a burden, of being unwanted. The old woman turned to leave, her eyes glassy. "Wait." The word left Sophia's mouth before she could stop it. It wasn't a whisper, it was a declaration. Laurent whipped his head around, his eyes bulging. "Rossi, back to your station." Sophia ignored him. Her legs moved on their own. She walked across the polished floor, past the gawking billionaires, past the stunned hostess, and stopped in front of the wet, shivering woman. "We have a table," Sophia said, her voice shaking but clear. She pointed to a small two-top near the kitchen doors. The worst table in the house, usually reserved for staff meals or solo diners they wanted to hide. "Table 11 is open." "Rossi," Laurent barked, "you are fired. Get away from her." "She is a customer, Laurent," Sophia said, turning to face him. She felt a surge of adrenaline she had never felt before. "She has money. She wants food. If you kick her out into this storm, you're not just a snob, you're heartless. And I'll make sure everyone on Yelp knows it." It was a hollow threat. Billionaires didn't check Yelp, but the sheer audacity of it stunned Laurent into silence. The dining room was quiet. People were watching. For a high-end restaurant, a scene was the worst possible outcome. Laurent calculated quickly. If he dragged the woman out screaming, it would cause a disturbance. If he let her sit in the corner and eat quickly, the problem would resolve itself quietly. "Fine," Laurent hissed through gritted teeth, stepping close to Sophia. "She sits, she eats, she leaves, and then you leave. Pack your locker, Rossi. This is your last shift." Sophia nodded. She didn't care. Looking at the woman's shivering hands, she knew she had made the right choice. "Vieni con me, signora." "Come with me, ma'am," Sophia said softly, switching to the language of her childhood. The old woman looked up, startled. A flicker of warmth ignited in her cold, dark eyes. She nodded and followed Sophia to the small table in the shadows. As Sophia pulled out the chair, the restaurant doors swung open again. This time, the silence was different. It wasn't the silence of confusion, it was the silence of fear. Dominic Sterling had arrived. Dominic Sterling did not walk, he cut through space. He was flanked by 3 men in suits who looked like they chewed gravel for breakfast, and a woman holding a tablet who was typing furiously as she walked. Dominic was handsome in a severe, predatory way. He had dark hair, graying at the temples, and eyes the color of ice. He bypassed the hostess stand entirely. Laurent practically sprinted to intercept him, his earlier rage replaced by a sycophantic oiliness. "Mr. Sterling, welcome, welcome. Your table is ready. We have the 82 Waitress breathing for you." Dominic didn't look at him. "I'm not here for the wine, Laurent. I'm here to close the merger with the Japanese delegation." "Are they here?" "Arriving in 5 minutes, sir." Dominic nodded and strode toward the elevated king's table. As he passed through the center of the room, the energy shifted. He was the sun, and everyone else was a planet orbiting his gravity. He exuded power so raw it felt physical. Sophia was busy at table 11. She had fetched a warm towel from the back, stealing it, technically, and was handing it to the old woman. "Here," Sophia whispered. "Dry your hands. I'll bring you some hot tea. On the house. Don't tell the manager." The woman took the towel, her hands gnarled and spotted with age. "Grazie, bambina," she rasped. You are kind. Too kind for a place like this. I'm losing my job anyway. Sophia gave a weak, sad smile. Might as well go out doing something good. What is your name? The woman hesitated. Her eyes darted toward the king's table, where Dominic was currently taking his seat, his back to them. She stared at the back of his head with an intensity that bordered on physical pain. Lucia, she whispered. My name is Lucia. Nice to meet you, Lucia. I'm Sophia. I'm going to get you the best food we have. The osso buco. It's warm, it's heavy. It's what you need. No. Lucia grabbed Sophia's wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. No fancy food, just bread. Do you have fresh bread? And olive oil? And salt? Bread? Sophia blinked. Lucia, I can get you steak. I can get you… Pan, Lucia insisted, her voice trembling. Pane e sale, please. Sophia nodded, confused but willing. Okay, bread and salt, coming right up. As Sophia rushed to the kitchen, the atmosphere in the restaurant tightened. The Japanese delegation had arrived. They were solemn, serious men. They sat with Dominic Sterling. The waiters swarmed them like synchronized swimmers. Sophia grabbed a basket of the rustic sourdough the restaurant baked in-house. She poured a small saucer of their finest olive oil. Then she paused. Salt. The obsidian used pink Himalayan sea salt served in tiny crystal jars. It was fancy, pretentious salt. Sophia remembered something her nonna used to say. The rich eat salt to taste the ocean. The poor eat salt to taste the earth. She grabbed the crystal jar, but then she saw Lucia watching her from across the room. Lucia looked terrified. She kept glancing at Dominic, shrinking into her coat every time he laughed. A booming, harsh sound that echoed off the glass walls. Sophia walked the bread to table 11. Here, Lucia. Lucia stared at the bread. She broke off a piece, her hand shaking. She dipped it in the oil. Then she looked at the salt. She took a pinch of salt and sprinkled it on the bread. She took a bite. She closed her eyes, and a single tear leaked out, tracking through the dirt on her cheek. It is cold, Lucia whispered. The bread. I can heat it up. No, Lucia said, the heart of this place. It is cold. She opened her eyes and looked at Sophia. He is here, isn't he? My son. Sophia froze. Your son. Lucia nodded toward the king's table. Domenico. Sophia turned slowly. She looked at Dominic Sterling, the billionaire, the tyrant, the man who wore suits that cost more than Sophia's entire education. Mr. Sterling is your son, Sophia whispered, disbelief coloring her tone. Lucia, are you sure? Maybe you're confused. It was a cruel thing to suggest, but the disparity was impossible. Dominic Sterling came from old money. Or so the magazine said. He was an Ivy League prodigy. This woman, she was destitute. I am not confused, Lucia said, her voice hardening. I am forgotten. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the king's table. Laurent had dropped a tray. Or rather, Dominic Sterling had knocked it out of his hand. I said no onions, Dominic roared. The entire restaurant went deathly silent. How many times do I have to tell you, incompetent fools? The Japanese delegation does not eat onions in the salad. It is an insult. Sir, I apologize, Laurent stammered on his knees, picking up shards of porcelain. The chef works for me. You work for me. Dominic stood up, looming over the table. He was terrifying. Get this filth out of my sight, and bring me the wine list again. This vintage tastes like vinegar. He was a bully, a rich, spoiled bully. Sophia felt a surge of anger. She looked at Lucia. The old woman was trembling violently now, clutching the piece of bread as if it were a lifeline. He was not always like this, Lucia whispered. He used to be sweet. He used to love the rain. Sophia looked at the sad, broken woman and then at the tyrant destroying the night for everyone. Why are you here, Lucia? Sophia asked softly. If he is your son, why are you sitting here in the dark? Because today is his birthday, Lucia said, and for 10 years he has not answered my calls. I just wanted to see if he still eats the bread. The bread. When we were poor, Lucia said, staring into the candle flame on her table. When we had nothing in Italy before we came here, I would bake the bread. We had no meat, no cheese, just bread, oil, and salt. I told him it was king's food. I told him… She choked back a sob. I told him the salt was the tears of the angels blessing us. Sophia felt her heart break. He needs to know you're here, Sophia said firmly. No, Lucia panicked. He will hate me. Look at me. I am a mess. I am ashamed to him. He tells everyone his parents are dead. He tells everyone he was born into greatness. He is a liar, Sophia said, and he is acting like a child. Laurent was rushing past them toward the kitchen, his face pale. He spotted Sophia standing at table 11. Rossi, he snapped, stop gossiping with the vagrant. Table 2 needs clearing, now. Sophia didn't move. She looked at the bread in Lucia's hand. An idea formed in her mind. It was crazy. It was suicide. It would definitely ensure she never worked in this city again. Lucia, Sophia said, bending down, tell me something. Tell me something only he would know. Something from the bread days. Lucia looked up, tears brimming. There is a saying. My grandmother taught it to me. I used to whisper it to him when he was scared of the thunder. Tell me, Sophia commanded softly. Lucia whispered a sentence in Italian. It was poetic, rhythmic, and old. Sophia memorized it. She took a deep breath. Rossi, Laurent shouted from across the room. Sophia grabbed the basket of bread from Lucia's table, the cheap rustic sourdough with the side of oil and salt. Sophia, what are you doing? Lucia gasped. I'm delivering a birthday present, Sophia said. She turned and walked straight toward the king's table. Laurent saw her. His eyes went wide. He started to run to intercept her. Rossi, no. But Sophia was faster. She bypassed the security detail who were distracted by the spilled salad on the floor. She walked right up to Dominic Sterling, who was currently berating the sommelier. Mr. Sterling, Sophia said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. Dominic stopped mid-sentence. He turned his cold, grey eyes onto her. He looked her up and down with a mix of boredom and irritation. Who are you? He sneered. And why are you interrupting my dinner? I have a special delivery, Sophia said. She placed the basket of rustic bread on the pristine white tablecloth right in front of him. It looked absurd amidst the crystal and silver. The Japanese businessmen stared. Laurent arrived at her elbow, breathless. Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry. Laurent grabbed Sophia's arm hard enough to bruise. This waitress is mentally unstable. She is being terminated immediately. I will remove this garbage. Laurent reached for the bread basket. Don't touch it, Dominic said. His voice was quiet. Dangerous. Dominic was staring at the bread. He wasn't looking at the crust or the oil. He was looking at the salt. It was sprinkled on top, just the way Lucia had done it. Uneven. Chunky. What is this? Dominic asked, not looking up. Sophia leaned in, close enough that the security guard took a step forward. She ignored him. She looked right into the billionaire's eyes and whispered the sentence Lucia had given her. Il sangue non diventa mai acqua, e il pane non si scorda del sale. Blood never becomes water, and bread never forgets the salt. Dominic Sterling froze. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like he had been shot. The fork in his hand clattered onto the china plate. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm outside. It was the silence of a tomb being cracked open. The silence in the obsidian room was absolute. It was a vacuum that sucked the air out of the lungs of every patron, waiter, and busboy. Even the jazz trio in the corner had stopped playing, the bassist freezing with his hand halfway down the neck of his instrument. Dominic Sterling, the man who could crash a stock market with a frown, was staring at a piece of bread as if it were a loaded gun. His hand, usually steady enough to sign billion-dollar contracts without a tremor, was hovering over the table. The veins in his neck bulged against the starch of his collar. The sentence Sophia had whispered hung in the air between them, invisible but heavy. Il sangue non diventa mai acqua, e il pane non si scorda del sale. Dominic slowly lifted his gaze from the bread to Sophia. His eyes were no longer cold grey ice, they were wild, shattered things. For a split second, the facade of the American billionaire cracked, and underneath, Sophia saw a scared, starving boy. Who told you that? Dominic's voice was a low growl, barely audible, but it carried the weight of a collapsing building. Mr. Sterling, Laurent interjected, sweating profusely, misreading the situation entirely. I am calling the police immediately. This woman is harassing you. Shut up. Dominic slammed his fist onto the table. The crystal glasses jumped. Wine sloshed onto the white linen like a fresh wound. Laurent recoiled, terrified. The Japanese delegation exchanged sharp, rapid glances. Mr. Tanaka, the head of the delegation, narrowed his eyes, sensing a shift in the tectonic plates of the negotiation. Dominic stood up. He didn't smooth his suit jacket. He didn't check his watch. He loomed over Sophia, his breathing ragged. "Where did you hear that phrase?" he demanded, stepping into her personal space. "That is not a phrase people know. It is not in books." "No," Sophia said, holding her ground despite her knees knocking together. "It's not in a book. It's a memory." "Stop playing games," Dominic hissed. "Is this blackmail? Did a journalist send you? Who dug this up?" "Nobody dug anything up, Dominic," Sophia said, using his first name. It was a transgression that would have gotten her fired in any other timeline, but in this one, it was the only way to reach him. "She is sitting right there." Sophia turned and pointed a shaking finger toward the darkest corner of the room, near the swinging kitchen doors. Toward table 11. Dominic followed her finger. At first, he didn't seem to see her. His eyes scanned past the shadows, conditioned to ignore the ugly, the poor, the messy parts of the world. But then, the figure in the wet trench coat moved. Lucia lifted her head. The lighting was dim, but the candlelight from the table flickered across her face. The lined skin, the weary set of her jaw, the eyes that held a universe of sorrow. Dominic stopped breathing. Flashbacks hit him like physical blows. Naples, 1995. The smell of sewage and sea salt. The tiny one-room apartment with mold climbing the walls like black ivy. The sound of his stomach growling, a constant gnawing beast. He remembered his mother, Lucia, coming home from scrubbing floors at the wealthy villas. She would be exhausted, her hands raw and red from bleach. But she always had something. A heel of bread, a little oil. He remembered the shame, the burning, acidic shame of being the trash boy at school. He remembered vowing, as he watched his mother weep over unpaid bills, that he would kill Domenico. He would bury the Italian pauper and be reborn as Dominic Sterling, a man who needed nothing, who owed nothing. He had succeeded. He had buried Domenico deep. But now Domenico was clawing his way out of the grave. "Mama," the word escaped his lips. It wasn't English. It wasn't the refined diction of a CEO. It was the rough, childlike plea of a boy. The Japanese businessman watched, fascinated. This was not the ruthlessly efficient machine they had come to do business with. This was a man coming undone. "Excuse me," Dominic said to the table, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. He stepped off the raised platform. He didn't walk with his usual confident stride. He walked slowly, heavily, as if the floor were made of quicksand. Every step toward table 11 stripped away another layer of his armor. The restaurant watched. The billionaires, the models, the politicians, they all turned their heads. They sensed the drama, the impossible friction of two worlds colliding. Sophia followed him, staying a few steps back. She felt protective of Lucia. She saw the way Dominic's jaw was clenched. He wasn't just shocked, he was angry. He was a man whose carefully constructed reality was being invaded. When Dominic reached table 11, he stopped. Lucia didn't stand up. She couldn't. Her legs had turned to jelly. She looked up at the man in the $5,000 suit, the man whose face was on the cover of Forbes, and she tried to find her little boy in his eyes. "Domenico," she whispered. Dominic stared down at her. He looked at the muddy boots, the plastic bag on the floor, the wet hair. "What are you doing here?" Dominic asked. His voice was cold. It wasn't the warm reunion Sophia had hoped for. It was sharp, defensive. Lucia flinched. "I wanted to see you. It is your birthday." "My birthday," Dominic repeated, a bitter laugh escaping him. "So you come here? To the Obsidian? Look at you, Mother. Look at this place." "I know," Lucia said, tears spilling over. "I know I don't belong. This girl, she let me sit. She gave me bread." "You shouldn't be here," Dominic said, his voice rising. The shame was burning him alive. He felt the eyes of New York's elite boring into his back. He felt the judgment. "That's Dominic Sterling's mother, the bag lady." "I called you," Lucia said softly. "For 10 years. I left messages. I wrote letters. I was busy, Dominic lied. I was building an empire. I was building a life where we never have to eat stale bread again. But you are eating it alone, Lucia cried out, her voice cracking. You have a castle, Domenico, but it is empty. Keep your voice down, Dominic hissed, looking around. Laurent, sensing an opening to save his own skin, rushed forward again. Mr. Sterling, shall I have security remove her? She is clearly upsetting you. This is a trespasser. Don't touch her, Dominic snapped at Laurent, but then he turned back to Lucia with a look of agony. Why did you have to come now? Tonight? I have the biggest deal of my life at that table. Do you have any idea what you're doing to me? Sophia couldn't stay silent. The cruelty was too much. She walked here, Sophia said, stepping between them. She walked 5 miles in the rain because she couldn't afford a cab. She didn't come to ruin your deal. She came because she loves you, which is more than anyone at that fancy table can say. Dominic turned on Sophia, his eyes blazing. You are the one who orchestrated this. You let her in. You humiliated me. I didn't humiliate you, Sophia said, her voice shaking with rage. You are humiliating yourself. You're ashamed of the woman who scrubbed floors so you could eat. You're a coward, Mr. Sterling. The word hung in the air. Coward. Nobody called Dominic Sterling a coward. The air in the restaurant was so tense, it felt like a spark could ignite the oxygen. Dominic stared at the waitress. A nobody. A girl in a cheap uniform with a coffee stain on her apron. She was looking at him with more defiance than any CEO he had ever crushed. He looked back at his mother. Lucia was weeping silently now, hiding her face in her rough red hands. Dominic felt a splitting headache forming behind his eyes. He was torn between the boy who loved his mother and the man who needed to protect his image. In his world, weakness was death. Poverty was a disease he had cured himself of. Seeing her was like seeing a recurrence of the cancer. He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a checkbook. The room gasped. Dominic, no, Sophia whispered, realizing what he was doing. Dominic uncapped a fountain pen. He wrote furiously, tearing the check out with a violent rip. Here, Dominic said, thrusting the piece of paper at Lucia. There is $50,000. Take it. Go home. Buy whatever you want. Buy a house. Just go. Please. Lucia looked at the check. She saw the zeros. It was more money than she had seen in her entire life. It was enough to fix her leaking roof, to buy heating oil for the winter, to pay off her debts. She looked up at Dominic. Her eyes were dry now. The sorrow had been replaced by a crushing disappointment. You think I came for this? Lucia asked, her voice quiet and steady. It's what you need, isn't it? Dominic said, his voice sounding desperate. Money solves everything. That's what I learned. That's what I did. I fixed it, Mama. I won. Lucia stood up. She was short, barely reaching Dominic's chest, but in that moment she seemed 10 feet tall. She took the check. She looked at it for a long moment. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, she tore it in half. Then in quarters. She let the confetti of paper fall onto the table, landing in the leftover olive oil. I didn't want your money, Domenico, she said. I wanted my son. I wanted to know if the man who owns the world still had a heart. But I see now. She touched her chest. You are poor. You are the poorest man I have ever met. She turned to Sophia. Thank you, Angel, for the bread. It was warm. Lucia turned and began to walk toward the exit. She moved with a heavy, limping gait, her wet coat dragging on the marble. Dominic stood frozen. The check, his power, his solution, lay dissolving in the oil. Let her go, Laurent whispered to the staff. Good riddance. But the drama wasn't over. At the king's table, Mr. Tanaka stood up. The Japanese CEO was a man of few words, known for his obsession with Bushido, the code of honor. He had been watching the entire exchange with hawk-like intensity. He walked down the steps of the platform, his entourage following. He didn't walk to Dominic. He walked to the door, intercepting Lucia just as she reached the handle. Signora, Tanaka said. Lucia stopped, startled. Tanaka bowed. It wasn't a nod. It was a deep, formal bow of respect, a bow usually reserved for heads of state. Your son, Tanaka said in perfect, accented English, has forgotten the face of his obligation. But I have not. He turned to look at Dominic, who was still standing by table 11, looking like a statue of regret. "Mr. Sterling," Tanaka called out. The acoustics of the room carried his voice to every corner. "The deal is off." Dominic blinked, snapping out of his trance. "What?" "Sterling Vanguard is a powerful company," Tanaka said, his voice stern. "But at Tanaka Industries, we do not partner with men who treat their ancestors like beggars. A man who has no loyalty to the woman who gave him life will have no loyalty to his partners. You have no honor." Dominic felt the blood drain from his face. The deal was worth $4 billion. It was the capstone of his career. "Mr. Tanaka, please." Dominic stepped forward, his hands raised. "You don't understand the history. It's complicated. This is a private family matter." "It was public enough for me to see your soul," Tanaka replied. Tanaka turned back to Lucia. "Madame, my driver is outside. He will take you wherever you wish to go. Please, allow me this honor." Lucia looked at the stranger, confused but grateful. "Thank you," she whispered. As Tanaka opened the door for her, the stress of the night finally caught up with Lucia. Her body, weakened by hunger, the freezing rain, and the emotional devastation of her son's rejection, simply gave out. She didn't cry out, she just crumpled. One moment she was standing, the next she was falling backward. "Lucia!" Sophia screamed, sprinting across the room. Sophia slid across the marble floor, catching Lucia's head just before it hit the hard stone. "Call 911, Sophia yelled, her nurse training kicking in. She checked for a pulse. It was thready, weak. Lucia's skin was clammy and grey. "Mama!" Dominic shouted. The billionaire moved. He vaulted over a chair, knocking it aside, and sprinted the length of the restaurant. He fell to his knees beside Sophia and his mother. "Mama, Mama, wake up." Dominic shook her shoulders gently. His facade was completely gone now. He was crying, ugly, heaving sobs. "She's going into shock," Sophia said, her fingers on Lucia's neck. "She's hypothermic and likely malnourished." "Dominic, hold her head up. Keep her airway open." "Is she dying?" Dominic choked out, terror in his eyes. "Is she dying, Sophia?" "I don't know," Sophia said, her own heart racing. "But you better pray she isn't. Because if she dies thinking you hate her, that's on you forever." The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, cutting through the heavy rain. The ambulance ride was a blur of flashing lights and static radio chatter. Dominic insisted on riding in the back. The paramedics initially tried to stop him. Family usually rode up front or followed in a car. But one look at Dominic's face, a mask of pure, unadulterated panic, made them back down. Sophia followed in a taxi. She hadn't even clocked out. She was still wearing her apron. She knew she was fired. Laurent had made that clear with a hand gesture as she ran out the door. But she couldn't leave Lucia alone. At Mount Sinai Hospital, the chaos of the ER was a stark contrast to the hush of the Obsidian. Dominic Sterling, the master of the universe, was reduced to pacing a scuffed linoleum waiting room floor. He had lost his jacket. His shirt was stained with rain and the oil from the breadbasket he had leaned against. He looked like a wreck. Sophia sat on a plastic chair, watching him. "You should eat something," she said quietly. Dominic stopped pacing. He looked at her. "Eat? You think I can eat?" "You're shaking," Sophia noted. "I almost killed her," Dominic whispered. He slumped into the chair next to her, putting his head in his hands. "I saw her standing there, Sophia, and I felt so much hate. Not for her, for myself, for who I used to be." "You can't kill the past, Dominic," Sophia said. "You can only make peace with it." "I lied to everyone," he confessed, his voice muffled by his hands. "I told the board I came from old money in Connecticut. I told the press my parents died in a skiing accident in the Alps. I invented a life because the truth was too dirty. I thought if I let her in, the whole lie would unravel." "The truth always comes out," Sophia said, "usually when you least expect it." "Tanaka walked," Dominic said, a hollow laugh escaping him. $4 billion. Gone. The board is going to crucify me in the morning. Stock will tank. I might lose the company." "Good," Sophia said. Dominic looked up, shocked. "Good. Yes, good," Sophia said firmly, "because now you have nothing to lose. And when you have nothing to lose, you can finally see what's actually important. Like that woman in there fighting for her life." A doctor emerged from the double doors. He looked tired. Dominic sprang up. "Doctor, how is she?" "She's stable," the doctor said. Dominic let out a breath that sounded like a sob. "But she is very weak. Pneumonia, severe malnutrition, stress cardiomyopathy, what we call broken heart syndrome. Her heart is literally weakened by emotional distress." Dominic flinched as if slapped. "Can I see her?" "Briefly, she needs rest. She's asking for Domenico." Dominic nodded. He turned to Sophia. "Come with me." "No, this is family," Sophia said. "Please," Dominic said. "I don't know how to do this alone. I don't know how to be her son anymore. I need help." Sophia saw the vulnerability in his eyes. He wasn't the king of Wall Street. He was just a man who had lost his way. "Okay," she said. They walked into the dimly lit room. Lucia looked tiny in the hospital bed, hooked up to IVs and monitors. The beep 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 of the heart monitor was the only sound. Dominic approached the bed. He reached out and took her hand. It was rough, calloused, warmer now than it had been in the restaurant. "Mama," he whispered. Lucia's eyes fluttered open. She looked at him, groggy and confused. "Domenico," she croaked. "Are we in America?" She was confused, her mind drifting back to the past. "Yes, Mama. We're in New York," Dominic said, tears streaming down his face. "Did you get the job?" she asked. "The one at the factory," Dominic choked. She was remembering a time 30 years ago when he was a teenager looking for work. "I got a better job, Mama," he said, squeezing her hand. "I promise, I got a much better job." "Good," she sighed, closing her eyes. "Don't forget the bread. Bring bread home." "I will," Dominic promised. "I'll bring all the bread." He sat there for an hour, just holding her hand. When she fell into a deep sleep, he finally stood up and walked Sophia into the hallway. "Thank you," he said, "for saving her, for saving me." "I just did my job," Sophia said. "No," Dominic shook his head. "You did more than that. You risked your livelihood for a stranger." He paused. "You're fired, aren't you?" Laurent was pretty clear about it. Sophia shrugged, trying to act like she didn't care. "It's okay. I hated that uniform anyway." "You're not fired," Dominic said. A spark of the old authority returned to his voice, but it was softer now. "In fact, you're promoted." "I don't want to work at the Obsidian, Dominic. I don't like who people become in that room." "Neither do I," Dominic said. He looked out the window at the city skyline, the rain finally stopping. "That's why I'm going to burn it down." "Metaphorically?" Sophia asked. "We'll see," Dominic said. "But first I have to deal with the sharks. The video is out." "What video?" Dominic pulled out his phone. He opened Twitter. Trending #1 worldwide was Billionaire beggar. Someone at the restaurant had filmed the entire thing. The rejection, the check tearing, Mr. Tanaka's speech, Lucia's collapse. The comments were brutal. "Dominic Sterling is a monster. Boycott Vanguard. This is what capitalism looks like." "My career is dead," Dominic said, staring at the screen. "Maybe," Sophia said, "or maybe this is your chance to tell the truth." Dominic looked at her. A plan began to form in his mind. It was risky. It was insane. It was exactly the kind of maneuver that had made him a billionaire in the first place. But this time, the currency wasn't dollars. It was redemption. "I need you to come with me tomorrow," Dominic said. "Where?" "To a press conference," Dominic said. "I'm going to introduce the world to Lucia Sterling, and I need you there to make sure I don't run away." The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Sterling Vanguard Tower, but inside the atmosphere was dark. The mood in the executive boardroom on the 80th floor was funereal. Arthur Pendleton, the chairman of the board, paced the length of the Persian rug. He was a man who looked like a shark in a three-piece suit, slick, predatory, and smelling of blood. "The stock is down 12%, Dominic," Arthur spat, pointing at the massive screen displaying the plummeting red line. 12% in 8 hours. Because you decided to have a mommy issue meltdown in the middle of the Obsidian. Dominic sat at the head of the table. He hadn't slept. He was wearing a fresh suit, but he hadn't shaved. The stubble on his jaw made him look dangerous, unhinged. "I didn't have a meltdown, Arthur," Dominic said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I had an awakening." "Spare me the spiritual mumbo-jumbo," Arthur sneered. "The Japanese deal is dead. Tanaka is insulted. The press is calling you the billionaire Scrooge. We have a crisis management team downstairs drafting your resignation statement. You will sign it, cite personal health reasons, and disappear to a private island for a year until this blows over. Dominic looked at the resignation papers slid across the mahogany table. And if I refuse? Then we vote you out, Arthur said, leaning in. We have the votes, Dominic. You're done. You're a liability. You're toxic. Dominic looked at the papers, then he looked at his phone. Sophia had sent him a text. Lucia is awake. She's asking for you. Don't let them bully you. Remember the salt. Dominic stood up. I'm not resigning. Then we will destroy you, Arthur threatened. You can try, Dominic said. But first, I have a press conference to give. The reporters are already in the atrium, aren't they? You are to stick to the script, Arthur shouted as Dominic walked out the door. Read the apology. Do not deviate. Dominic took the elevator down to the lobby. The atrium was packed. Hundreds of cameras, reporters from CNN, BBC, Fox, and every major financial blog were jostling for position. The noise was deafening. When Dominic stepped onto the podium, the flashes went off like a strobe light, blinding him. He blinked, adjusting his eyes. He saw Sophia standing in the back, near the security detail. She gave him a small, firm nod. Dominic adjusted the microphone. He looked at the teleprompter. It scrolled the words the PR team had written. I deeply regret the misunderstanding. I am seeking counseling. I apologize to the staff. Dominic reached out and turned the teleprompter off. A collective gasp went through the PR team in the front row. Arthur Pendleton, watching from the wings, went pale. I am not here to apologize for a misunderstanding, Dominic began, his voice booming through the speakers. Because there was no misunderstanding, the video you saw was true. I was ashamed of my mother. I was ashamed of my poverty. I tried to buy her off with a check because I had forgotten how to be a son. The room went silent. This wasn't the corporate spin they were used to. This was a confession. My name is not Dominic Sterling, he continued. My name is Domenico Luciani. I was born in a tenement in Naples. My father left before I was born. My mother, Lucia, scrubbed toilets for 30 years so I could have school books. She ate the crusts of the bread so I could have the soft center. He reached under the podium and pulled out something he had brought with him. It wasn't a graph or a spreadsheet. It was the loaf of rustic sourdough bread from the Obsidian. He held it up. This, Dominic said, is what built this company. Not stocks, not bonds, hunger. The hunger to survive. But somewhere along the way, I became the thing I hated. I built a glass tower to look down on the world, instead of building a table to feed it. He looked directly into the camera lens. Arthur Pendleton and the board of directors have asked for my resignation. They say I am bad for business. Arthur stepped forward from the wings, signaling the sound technician to cut the mic. But the technician, mesmerized, didn't move. They are right, Dominic said. I am bad for their business. Because their business is greed. But today, Sterling Vanguard changes. I am not resigning. I am pivoting. He paused for effect. As of this morning, I am liquidating my majority stake in our luxury real estate division. I am taking that capital, roughly $2 billion, and I am launching the Lucia Foundation. We will not be building penthouses for billionaires anymore. We will be building affordable housing and community food centers in every major city where we operate. We will feed the people who built this city, not just the ones who own it. Pandemonium broke out. Reporters were shouting questions. Arthur Pendleton looked like he was having a stroke. One last thing, Dominic shouted over the noise. To the waiter who was fired last night, Sophia Rossi. The cameras swung around, searching the room. Sophia froze. She hadn't expected this. Sophia, Dominic said, looking across the sea of heads to find her. You reminded me that bread never forgets the salt. You are not fired. You are hired. I need a director of operations for the foundation, someone who knows that people are more important than profit. The job is yours if you want it. All eyes turned to Sophia. She felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She was just a nursing student. She was a waitress. But looking at Domenico, standing there, stripping away his ego on live television, she knew she couldn't say no. She stepped forward, past the security line. The cameras parted for her like the Red Sea. She walked up the steps to the podium. She didn't take the microphone, she just stood next to him. "I'll take the job," she said, loud enough for the mic to catch. "But only if we start with the hospital bills. Lucia needs the best care." "Done," Dominic said. He turned back to the press. "You have your headline. The ruthless king is dead. Long live the baker's son." He walked off the stage, Sophia by his side, leaving the media in a frenzy and the board of directors in ruins. 6 months later, the building on the corner of 10th and Broadway used to be a derelict warehouse. Now it was bright, airy, and smelled of yeast and rosemary. The sign above the door was simple, hand-painted on reclaimed wood, "Il sale e pane," the salt and bread. It wasn't a soup kitchen, though the food was free for those who couldn't pay. And it wasn't a luxury restaurant, though the food was better than anything at the Obsidian. It was a community table. Inside, there were no separate booths. There were long communal tables made of oak, where bankers sat next to construction workers, where students sat next to retirees. In the center of the open kitchen, wearing a white apron that was dusted with flour, was Dominic Sterling. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't checking a watch. He was kneading dough. His hands, once soft from lotion and handshakes, were now strong and dusted with white. He looked 10 years younger. Sophia walked in, clutching a clipboard. She looked exhausted but radiant. She was no longer wearing a uniform. She wore a sharp blazer and jeans. "We have a problem," Sophia said, leaning over the counter. Dominic looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Plumbing again?" "No," Sophia smiled. "We're out of seating. There's a line around the block." "That's a good problem," Dominic grinned. "Tell them we're bringing out focaccia and espresso to the line. No one waits hungry." "You tell them," a rasping voice came from the corner. Sitting in a comfortable armchair near the dough mixer was Lucia. She looked frail, but her color had returned. Her hair was clean and brushed, and she wore a warm woolen shawl that Dominic had bought her. She was the queen mother of the kitchen. Her job, she insisted, was quality control. "Mama, the salt?" Dominic asked, holding up a piece of fresh bruschetta. Lucia took a bite. She chewed thoughtfully, closing her eyes. Dominic held his breath. She was a harsher critic than the New York Times. "It needs a pinch more," she declared. "And more love, Domenico. You are rushing the dough." "Yes, Mama," Dominic laughed. The bell above the door chimed. The chatter in the room quieted down instantly. Standing in the doorway was a man flanked by 2 assistants. He wore an impeccable suit. It was Mr. Tanaka. Dominic wiped his hands on a towel and walked around the counter. The room watched tensely. The last time these 2 men had met, $4 billion had evaporated. "Mr. Tanaka," Dominic said, extending a flour-dusted hand. Then he pulled it back. "Sorry." "Flour." Mr. Tanaka didn't look at the flour. He looked at the room. He saw the families eating. He saw the laughter. He saw Lucia in the corner. He walked past Dominic and went straight to Lucia. "Signora," Tanaka bowed low. "Mr. Tanaka," Lucia smiled, "you are hungry." "I am," Tanaka said, "but not for business. I heard the food here has soul." "Sit," Lucia commanded, pointing to a spot on the bench next to a young street artist. "Domenico, bread for Mr. Tanaka." Dominic rushed to slice a fresh loaf. He placed it on a wooden board with a small bowl of oil and the coarse salt. He brought it to Tanaka. Tanaka took a piece, dipped it, and ate. He nodded slowly. "I see you found your honor, Mr. Sterling," Tanaka said quietly. "I had help," Dominic said, looking at Sophia, who was busy organizing the volunteers. "My offer still stands," Tanaka said, "not for the merger. Sterling Vanguard is gone, I hear. But for this, I want to invest. I want to open these in Tokyo, in Kyoto. We have forgotten the bread and salt in my country too." Dominic smiled. "We can talk about it. But first, you have to try the pasta. Mama's recipe." As the kitchen bustled back to life, Sophia walked over to Dominic. "You realize you're still technically broke, right?" she teased. "You gave away almost everything." "I kept the penthouse," Dominic shrugged. "But I'm selling it next week. Too much glass. I'm buying a brownstone in Brooklyn. First floor for Mama, top floor for... Well, I was hoping for a roommate." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "A roommate?" "Someone who knows CPR," Dominic said, his eyes twinkling, "in case I have a heart attack from all this kneading." Sophia laughed, a genuine bright sound that cut through the clatter of plates. She reached out and brushed a smudge of flour off his nose. "I'll think about it," she said, "but only if you promise never to order sparkling water again." "Tap water only," Dominic swore. Lucia watched them from her chair, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She took a piece of bread, sprinkled a little salt on it, and whispered to herself, "Tutto è bene quel che finisce bene." All is well. That ends well. The rain began to fall outside, gentle and cleansing against the windows. But inside it was warm. The ghost of the obsidian was gone. The boy who was ashamed of his mother was gone. Domenico Luciani was home. Dominic Sterling lost a $4 billion empire, but he gained the only thing that actually matters, his soul. He learned that you can wear a $5,000 suit, but if you forget where you came from, you're just a beggar in disguise. And it took a brave waitress and a simple sentence about bread and salt to remind him that family is the only true wealth. What about you? If you were in Sophia's shoes, risking your job for a stranger, would you have spoken up? Or would you have stayed silent in the shadows? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps us share more stories like this. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the drama. Remember, blood never becomes water, and true kindness never goes unrewarded. See you in the next video.